Buenas tardes a todos y a todas, soy José Luis Aledo y en esta ponencia les hablaré acerca de la retratística inicial de la soberana tolemaica Berenice II de Egipto. Dadas mis limitaciones con la lengua inglesa, me comunicaré con ustedes en castellano. No obstante, si alguien necesita aclarar alguna duda o hacer alguna sugerencia, les remito a mi dirección de correo electrónico en la que podrán dirigirse la lengua que estimen conveniente. En cualquier caso, y para facilitar la comprensión al público de habla no hispana, el PowerPoint ha sido realizado en inglés. Por lo cual creo que es más interesante a la hora de presentar cuestiones con respecto al mismo. Bien. Nuestro objeto de estudio se trata de un entalle de granate procedente del Museo Walter Arts, en el cual aparece una representación de la reina tolemaica Berenice II. Esta pieza, procedente de una colección privada que fue adquirida por dicha institución en el año 1942, es excepcional dentro de la glíptica helenística, puesto que encontramos la firma del artista o del grabador, un tal Nicandro, lo cual, salvo raras excepciones como la gema de Naissos o la representación de Antíoco III de Siria en un entalle, no es muy común que encontremos este grado de información en estas composiciones, lo cual puede ser extrapolado a la existencia de una relación personal entre el representado y el propio artista, lo cual nos permitiría hablar de esa promoción de artistas en las cortes helenísticas del momento, ya que Alejandría era uno de los principales centros culturales del momento. Pero en cualquier caso, y volviendo con nuestra pieza, el material es el granate, cuya distribución no ofrece demasiada información, ya que lo encontramos tanto en Cartago, en la India, como en Etiopía. Sin embargo, a raíz de esta cita de Plinio que tienen ustedes en pantalla, queremos identificarlo con el sandrastro. ¿Por qué? Porque, y vuelvo a Plinio, este tipo de granate era utilizado por los caldeos en ceremonias de carácter astronómico, lo cual podría entrar en relación con la iconografía empleada, dado que, de acuerdo con la tradición helenística, Calímaco escribió un epigrama llamado La cabellera de Berenice, en el cual se transmitía el sacrificio de los cabellos de la reina para garantizar el regreso de Ptolomeo III de su expedición a Mesopotamia. Dicha cabellera se había convertido en una constelación, es decir, nos encontramos ante un catasterismo, lo cual podría tener una relación con el tipo de material empleado. En cualquier caso, nos ocuparemos más adelante de esta cuestión. Y me inclino a pensar que esta es un retrato de juventud, es decir, de los primeros años de Berenice como reina, por el tratamiento del cabello. Si nos damos cuenta, en el recogido existe una sensación de degradado. La parte superior es más abundante que la inferior, lo cual podría ser una evidencia de que es una representación que pretende transmitir el momento en el que la reina ha sacrificado su cabello. Por otra parte, sabemos que es una representación de Berenice II por el tratamiento anatómico. A esta reina gustaba representarla fielmente: una papada abundante, un mentón prominente, labios carnosos, nariz puntiaguda y ojos extremadamente grandes. Asimismo, otros elementos comunes a otros soportes como la numismática es la presencia de finos collares y del quitón. Como puede verse en este decadracma de Ptolomeo III, esposo de Berenice, el tratamiento anatómico parece universal a todas sus representaciones plásticas, aunque si bien es cierto que la numismática ofrece ciertas problemáticas, dado que son retratos estandarizados. Bien, como decíamos, el tratamiento de los ojos, de la nariz o del mentón presentan similitudes con respecto a la glíptica. Sin embargo, el recogido, el conocido como melon Frinsburg, discúlpenme por mi pronunciación, queda aquí tapado por el velo, el cual sabemos que era tradicional en las representaciones de las soberanas ptolemaicas, lo cual presenta una ventaja a la hora de analizar la glíptica, ya que podemos contraponer dos tipos de representaciones: la numismática, destinada a un público más amplio, dada la circulación de la misma, y la glíptica, un soporte más restringido a círculos particulares que podríamos acotar al entorno cortesano. De todas formas, esta mayor libertad en la glíptica la encontramos en otros soportes. Por ejemplo, este entalle de cornalina procedente del Museo Hermitage se representa a Berenice con una corona alusiva a un triunfo deportivo, lo cual podría guardar relación con el himno de Calímaco, en el que nos dice que los caballos de la reina ganaron una competición en los Juegos Nemeos. Al igual que en nuestro caso de estudio, encontramos similitudes en la papada, en la nariz, en los labios y en menor medida en los ojos, dado que estos no son tan globulares, pero el tratamiento asimismo del vestido presenta ciertas similitudes. Otra representación, esta ya más alejada de los cánones típicos de la reina, es este camafeo de Sardónice, en el que Berenice II es presentada como Atenea Partenos. Este tipo de representaciones de un carácter político nos permitiría analizar las relaciones entre Atenas y el Egipto tolemaico, ya que sabemos que a partir del reinado de Ptolomeo II, con la guerra lamíaca, estas relaciones de carácter geopolítico se intensifican. Bien, volviendo a la cuestión del cabello y el sacrificio, a pesar de que la composición de Calímaco no ha llegado íntegra hasta nosotros, contamos con la suerte de tener un resumen o una adaptación que el poeta latino Cátulo incluyó en sus Carmina. He seleccionado 3 fragmentos, los cuales para mí son capitales para entender tanto el motivo de nuestra iconografía en la glíptica como el propio mensaje a transmitir. Una breve lectura nos deja entrever el significado de Berenice, la cual es presentada como una joven virgen, una niñita asustada que, temerosa del destino de su esposo, Ptolomeo III, recordemos que haya marchado a los confines, a Mesopotamia, decide sacrificar su cabello, es decir, su belleza incolume, para garantizar su regreso, lo cual es recompensado por la divinidad, en este caso Venus, recordemos esa diosa del amor, a través de la creación de una constelación con esos caballos, el catasterismo, cabellos, perdón, he dicho caballos, el catasterismo, lo cual, sin embargo, viene dado por este segundo párrafo. Recuerda lo que hiciste tú en tu juventud para llegar a donde estabas. ¿Qué quiere decir con eso que tú hiciste para llegar a ser reina de Egipto? Pues bien, si nos vamos a la obra de Marco Justino, el epítome de las historias filípicas de Pompeyo Drugo, tenemos constancia que a la muerte de Magas, padre de Berenice y rey de Egipto, en principio ésta debía de contraer nupcias con Ptolomeo III para reunificar Cirene y Egipto, ya que ambos territorios se habían separado tras la independencia de Magas. Sin embargo, antes de que se consumase este matrimonio de carácter político, la reina madre, aquí presentada como Arsione, en realidad es Apama, princesa seleucida, solicita a un pretendiente a la casa real macedonia, en este caso un tal Demetrio apodado el Bello, para que se case con Berenice y así garantizar la independencia de Cirene. Sin embargo, de acuerdo con Justino, y quizá siguiendo esta tradición heredada de Calímaco, se nos presenta un Demetrio soberbio que, para ganarse el favor de su benefactora, en este caso Apama, comenzó a mantener relaciones sexuales con ella, lo cual, unido a su actitud inmoral, dio paso a un complot palaciego en el cual nuestra joven Berenice sorprendió a los amantes en el lecho nupcial y acabó con la vida de Demetrio, volviendo así a la voluntad del padre muerto, Magas, lo cual nos hablaría de esas relaciones entre estados en el siglo III. Pero en cualquier caso, esta tradición de acabar con el enemigo político heredada de la Macedonia argeada, aplicada a las féminas, como vemos, tiene que camuflarse con un componente amoroso en el que la moral se impone a la realidad política. Y esto nos lleva al recurso del sacrificio capilar, que como vemos era muy conocido en el mundo griego, ya que tenemos el caso de Peleo, que, desesperado por el regreso de su hijo Aquiles de Troya, sacrifica sus cabellos. Aquí tendríamos el paralelo con el recurso de Ptolomeo III en Mesopotamia. Y de igual manera las muchachas de Delos y Troce sacrificaban sus cabellos antes de contraer matrimonio, es decir, en esa transición entre la adolescencia y la madurez, que en cierta manera venía marcada por la pérdida de la virginidad. De ahí que se insista tanto en Berenice como una joven virgen. Y finalmente, ya adentrándonos en la realidad egipcia, tenemos el caso de Isis, la cual, de acuerdo con Plutarco, después de la muerte de su esposo y hermano Osiris, se cortó los cabellos. Esto entroncaría con la tradición tolemaica en la cual la pareja regia eran los dioses hermanos, herencia del matrimonio de Ptolomeo II con Alcione, la hieros gamos heredada de Zeus y Hera. En cualquier caso, esta tradición venía a amparar esta necesidad de lavar la imagen de Berenice, la exculpación ante el asesinato de su primer esposo, el Demetrio el Bello, amoldando su imagen a los cánones de lo que se esperaba de una reina. Por lo cual, esto nos lleva a pensar que esta presentación, como digo, restringida a los círculos cortesanos, pretendía expiar ese crimen por el cual Berenice había llegado a ser reina de Egipto. Y en conclusión, esto nos lleva, por una parte, a considerar la glíptica como un instrumento propagandístico en el Egipto tolemaico que nos permite ampliar nuestras miras con respecto a las fuentes literarias. Hemos comentado el caso de Cátulo y de Justino, y asimismo contraponer a esa imagen estática ofrecida por la numismática, que como vemos son retratos que no dejan demasiado la imaginación, ya que son imágenes estandarizadas, sobre todo en el caso femenino. Finalmente, esto confirma esta tendencia misógina amparada a las reinas helenísticas, que puede equipararse, por ejemplo, al caso de Olimpia de Macedonia, cuya labor política tras la muerte de Alejandro es excepcional y que en muchos casos se subsume bajo epítetos de un carácter que no deja mucho más allá de la misoginia, de una bruja, trascendiendo de esa imagen acomodada de estas reinas buenas, que eran ante todo esposas. Y finalmente, la importancia de la glíptica como recurso para el historiador. Muchas gracias a todos, espero que hayan disfrutado con mi presentación tanto como yo a la hora de realizarla. Un cordial saludo y mucha salud para todos y todas.
Hello, dear colleagues and organizers of our conference. My name is Karina Weiss. I'm a gem researcher working at Würzburg University in Germany. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present a contribution to the conference. The Roman gem, with an Armenian ruler presented here, belongs to the gem collection of Helmut Hansmann, a German journalist, which was donated after his death in 1996 to the Staatliche Antikensammlungen and Glyptothek Munich. In the 2000s, I have worked to prepare a catalogue which is still in production. The gem in question is a translucent oval carnelian with a beveled edge which slopes downward, widening towards the rear, which is very slightly domed. The frontal side is flat. The stone shows signs of former use with a scratched and roughened surface. The lost setting has left a line around the edge of the intaglio. Presumably, it was once worn as a ring, which is completely lost. The Form 9 in German publications follows the system of Erika Zwirlein-Diel. In English, it is set after Martin Hennig, Form 8a. The form is not often found in first-century rings, but the number of conical stones increases with the advancing 1st century and in the 2nd century. We recognize the bust of a bearded man with a star-studded cylindrical tiara and collar-like chains arranged on the chest with a face in profile to the left. The tiara with side flaps reaches down to the nape of the neck. It is the insignia of the Armenian rulers as shown in the coinage of Armenia under the Artaxids. Due to this tiara, the portrait probably represents an Armenian king, perhaps one of those with the name Tigranes or even Tiridates. The T amongst the letters could be a hint to these names. Definitely, the portrait does not show the famous king of King Tigranes II, whose portrait is well known in the Armenian coinage. He was beardless. Our gem is characterized by thick forehead and temple hair and a full compact beard with a rounded tip. A cloth which is ribbed at an angle in the lower part falls below the tiara and traces the contours of the neck and shoulders. The front edge under his ear is highlighted as a three-dimensional line, presumably the side flap rolled up, what indicates probably leather as material. Rolled-up side flaps or lappets are shown as well on some of the portraits in the coinage. This way of carrying has been documented on coins since the middle of the 1st century BC, as notices Torsten Benschus, 2018. Two straps running diagonally across the neck indicate the royal diadem, which is not visible here. On the coin portraits and on the gems, it is easily recognizable over the forehead, beneath the hair or around the tiara, with the ribbons hanging down the neck. In our case, the gem cutter depicted only the straps on the shoulder. This detail gives an impression that the king wore it on his bare head, that means under his tiara. On the first view, this seems unlikely. A diadem crowns the tiara, and not the other way round. But we will see later that there is some plausibility following the historical tradition in one special case. The tiara is decorated with 2 rows of crosses, signifying stars which belong to the usual decoration. A third row adorns the upper side of the tiara and represent its spikes. The letters EB in front of the face and TF behind the head are Roman, not Greek, another difference to the coinage, which has Greek letters. All letters have small slashes at the ends of the hooks. The letter feet are directed towards the edge of the gem. This feature also points to the advanced 1st century AD. The letters are to be read in the impression. That means the device could have been used as a seal. The several possibilities to interpret the letters we will discuss later. The style belongs to what in German is called feiner Flachbeldstil. In English one would use the term imperial small grooves style. This, together with the form of the gem, points more or less to a date in the advanced 1st century AD. There are some gems which represent parallels for images of Armenian rulers, but they both seem to be of earlier origin. A red jasper intaglio in Boston shows the head of Congressus II, the Great, facing left. He wears the Armenian tiara with 5 spikes. On the tiara with 2 flaps, an 8-pointed star with a central circle is flanked on either side by eagles. According to Edward Perrywarden's records, the gem was bought in Smyrna 1900 and purchased by the MFA from him in December 1901. Under Congressus II, the Armenian kingdom flourished and had its widest territory, covering vast parts of Asia Minor, Syria to the Mediterranean Sea and Palestine. Pushed back by Pompey, Armenia was drawn into the conflict between the Romans and the Parthians, as a buffer state at the end of 1st century BC and beginning 1st AD. Both great powers tried to influence Artaxid Armenia. The Roman-Armenian War, 58 to 63 AD, was the peak of the struggle under Nero. After the Peace of Aegaea, the Parthians asserted themselves with an Arsacid line of kings. On a burned chalcedony at Cristea, the bust was named Congressus II and dated obviously too early, 95 to 56 BC. It shows a clearly late Republican Roman style of cutting with the little pearl points. The king with a short growing beard is crowned by a victory. He could be the newly enthroned King Congressus III under the rule of Augustus. Coin and gem image show a similar tiara with high spikes, side flaps, and a surrounded inner field on the tiara for a motif. Tacitus' Annals has established that around 20 BC, in a message to Augustus, the Armenians expressed their unwillingness to keep Artaxias II as king and demanded that his brother Congressus III, finally in Roman custody in Alexandria, should be their king. Augustus sent troops under the command of Tiberius to remove Artaxias II. Before their arrival, Artaxias was murdered by the Armenians, and the Romans enthroned Congressus III unchallenged. This king was the father of Congressus IV, who followed him. Let us discuss now the identity of the portrait, which is not an easy task, as there is actually no consensus within numismatics about Armenian coinage between Congressus III and VI. The kings are not differentiated enough by their titles in the inscriptions. In modern research, especially Congressus IV and Congressus V are identified differently by Frank L. Kovacs, 2008, 2016, and Thorsten Bensch's 2017 and 18, which is the latest attempt to rearrange the strongly diverging attributions and to establish classifications for the coin types of the early imperial kings of Armenia. I follow Bensch's chronology, but I am not able to decide whether all of his attributions stay ultimately unchallenged. As we have seen, Tigranes III is initially beardless and then with a light beard. The coin portraits of his son and successor Tigranes IV, who had his first reign between 8 and 5 BC and his second reign with his half-sister wife Erato 2 to 1 AD, depict him in majority having a full beard. My first assumption was he could be a candidate for our gem portrait, but the tiara is diverse and the coins present him without any front hair. Therefore, I actually would exclude him from my considerations regarding our gem. The Armenian history in the first half of the century after Erato is a quickly changing period with chaotic series of pretenders from Parthian and Roman side. Armenia had become the plaything of the great powers. Around 54 AD, Tiridates, a brother of the Parthian king Vologases I, succeeded in priming the Armenian throne with the support of the Arsacids. In the beginning, this rule was suspended by the intervention of Rome. At the behest of Nero, Gnaeus Domitius Corbulo attacked and captured Tigranocerta and Artaxata. But nevertheless, Tiridates became the founder of the Arsacidian branch of the dynasty in Armenia and kept the reign at least until 72 AD. Interestingly, there are now 2 coins of Tiridates I, published by Kovacs, which present a bearded king in a complementarily similar tiara studded with stars. The flaps are missing or rolled up, also this a parallel. The Roman counter-pretender was the Herodian Tigranes VI, who was also related to the Artaxid royal house and was brought up in Rome as Gaius Julius Tigranes. He was heavily bearded too, but the coins assigned to him all show the tiara with drooping side flaps. After a change of the 2 on the Armenian throne, the conflict was resolved in the Peace of Rhandeia, 63, and Tiridates was finally crowned in Rome by Nero, 66. I think this could be the historical background in which this Roman gem could have been created, perhaps as a programmatic gift and memento to attenders of that crowning. Switoun, in his biography of Nero, has given a description of the crown ceremony. Tigranes had to step up a podium where the emperor sat and had to kneel down. Nero picked him up and kissed him. At Tigranes' request, Nero took the tiara off and put the diadem on his bare head. This is the reason, I think, why on this gem the diadem is beneath the tiara. To conclude, due to the style, the use of the Latin script, and the letter form, the gem image was probably created in the 60s of the 1st century BC, when the Parthians and Rome intervened in Armenian rule under Nero and established Tiridates, and with him the pro-Parthian line. The beard costume can be interpreted as a further indication. While the earlier Armenian kings appear beardless, there are bearded ones in the 1st century AD. Benschus sees that as a characteristic element of the portraits of the Arsacidian kings. That means the Parthians. Also, the chains across the breast point into this direction. At the end, Let us again pass to the letters EV and TF. Sébastien Aubry, Genève, whom I contacted with all the problems and suggestions made during my work at the conference and after to read and understand the inscribed letters, kindly informs me there are two main possibilities. A. If one relates the letters directly to the person depicted, who, as we believe, is Tiridates I, EV can be understood as Oituhi. Then it would read, "Good luck, Tigranes Fili." Then the inscription would refer to the second phase of reign of Tiridates, when he ruled Armenia from 66 to 72 or thereafter, with the tolerance of Rome and the coronation by Nero, not as a son, but as the successor of Tigranes VI, who sat on the Armenian throne in the interim phase between the two lords of Tiridates. Sébastien Aubry confirms me that Filius could also be seen in the meaning of successor. As an epitheton, EV could at most be resolved as Oiagetes, since it is found on coins of the Armenian rulers Artavasdes III and IV. The problem is, it does not refer to the figure of the Armenian ruler, but to the image on the reverse with Augustus. According to Aubry, the most plausible solution can be seen in an assumption of the Latin tria nomina without any historical connection to the portrayal of Tiridates. Of this solution B, there are again two options. Either you read over the cast from right to left and then have an indication of ancestry, EV, TF, EV for Eupator or Eutychus, as cognomina would be possible. TF would then stand, for example, for Tiridates as a cognomen of a freedman, or Titus or Tiberius, accordingly Tiridates vel Titi vel Tiberii Filius. Or one reads over the cast from left to right, then without an indication of ancestry, TF, EV, Titus, Tiberius, and then a Gentile name with initial F. For example, Fabius, Faustius, Festius, Firmius, etc., followed by EV, Eventus, Eventius, or Eventianus. This second possibility for the Latin tria nomina seems to be the most logical resolution, as informs me my friend and colleague Sébastien Aubry. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much to you, Dr. Weiss, for this very intriguing and exciting presentation. We'll discuss about the proposals a little bit later. We go now to our last speaker of the panel. So after we made a periplus around the Mediterranean, we finish with the best, last but not least, with Alexander the Great in late antiquity. So Nikos Trivisadakis from the Ephorate of Thessaloniki will present us the therapeutic qualities of Alexander the Great's image in early Byzantine engraved gems.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that you can hear and you can see me.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a heavy burden to speak after Dr. Weiss, but I hope that I will correspond to your expectations in any case. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you all and congratulate the people who organized that meeting, thus giving us the opportunity to come in contact with different aspects of the same matter, so as to use them as information that would encourage us for further investigation and action in order to produce new knowledge. And I think that that is the most important thing. Well, to continue with my presentation, well, you can see my screen, okay?
Yes, everything is fine. Let's go.
Okay, thank you. Well, okay. Well, a cameo of extreme importance can be found in the collections of the British Museum. That is a cameo made of onyx that depicts the head of Alexander the Great. The portrait of Alexander follows the established iconography of the great king. The king is represented in profile, head to the right. He is young and clean-shaven with long locks of hair rising above his forehead. Furthermore, Alexander is presented with horns curling around his ears, proving his divine origin as son of Ammon Zeus. In any case, the horns were symbols of divinity, but also of luck and abundance. Around the portrait of the king, there is an inscription in Greek as follows: "Iskalis tichis mnemonede mnithiti," meaning I remind to myself to remember its good luck. It's obvious that the purpose of the cameo was not just to reproduce the image of the Macedonian king, but mainly to represent him as a carrier of symbolic values. It seems that in early Byzantine centuries, there was a popular belief connected to the face of Alexander the Great, according to which the king was always accompanied by good fortune. That value is also related to the image of the king, and its presence is expanded also to the bearer of the cameo. The great church father, John Chrysostomus, at his sermon ad illuminandos catechesis prima, verifies the existence of that belief, since he states that people of his time tend to use coins and amulets depicting Alexander the Great as talismans that would offer them relief from pains in the head or body. John Chrysostom condemns the habit, since the trust to the image of mortal king shows clearly disrespect to the image of Christ and to the cross. These references give basis to the conception that the image of Alexander the Great, as preserved on precious objects and engraved jewels of early Byzantine era, is not only related to the importance of the Macedonian king as conqueror, king, and great ancestor of the Greek Byzantines, but clearly to the therapeutic qualities that accompany his figure. At this point, a very critical question arises: why the image of Alexander the Great had therapeutic qualities in a Christian framework? In order to find an answer to that question, we have to analyze the foundations, natural and mainly symbolic, of healing in early Christian Byzantine years, and to find the compatibility between the Christian medicine and the pagan king. It is true that the philosophers of the Greco-Roman world tried to view disease and sickness from a rational point of view and to explain it as an integral part of the order of things in nature. On the other hand, the vast majority of people found it difficult or even quite impossible to keep up with these beliefs. To them, sickness appeared to be a calamity or a disaster rather than a normal incident, and to be due to a supernatural rather to a natural cause. In fact, sickness was commonly regarded as punishment from some deity who was angry with mortals. The early Christians also thought sickness to be a mark of God's anger and disappointment. In the miracle of Jesus healing the paralytic man at Capernaum, he first announces to the man the forgiveness of his sins and then commands him to rise and walk. On another occasion, Jesus said to one whom he had healed, "Sin no more, or worse things will happen to you." And the Apostle Paul explains the sickness and death of certain members of the Corinthian community as due to their misconduct to the mystery of the Holy Communion. Another cause of sickness, and one which occupies the foremost place in the New Testament, is demon possession. Sickness in body and mind, and especially cases of mental retardation or disability, are attributed to the demonic presence. According to the Gospel of Matthew, the speech of a retarded man is restored when the demon is thrown away from him. Furthermore, the disciples, as reported by the evangelist Mark, fail in their task to heal the deaf and possessed boy, who seems also to have had mental issues. But when Jesus came, he was able to exile the evil and deaf spirits, and the boy immediately acquired his health. It seems that the notion that the presence of a demonic spirit in the body is the cause of illness accompanies the belief which makes sickness a punishment that comes from God as a result of the sin. In fact, the demon may be only the means which God uses for accomplishing his purpose. We can conclude that the great majority of simple people, of normal people, of everyday people in early Christian Byzantine era especially the ones without education or typical theological studies. They thought that religion had to offer, that only the religion had to offer accurate cure, accurate medicine for the illness of the body and the spirit. Fundamental to that religious frame is the view that healing ultimately comes from the deity of the divinity. Thus, the healing process takes place primarily in the spiritual world, while the physical treatment follows as a consequence. So it will not surprise us to assume that Christianity is from the beginning a healing religion. Within the frames of a healing religion, we must try now to find the relationship of Alexander the Great with the art and science of healing and medicine. That relationship begins even from Alexander's campaign to Asia, where the king brought together a great number of healers and physicians. Alexander thought highly of these craftsmen, since a physician of his campaign had to treat not only the usual wounds resulting from battles and fights, but also the illnesses due to the mass of people, such as epidemics and infectious diseases. It's not an exaggeration to say that, in a way, the healthcare needs in the campaign of Alexander were analogous and equally urgent as in any town or small city. We must also add to this a relevant factor for the health of people involved in the campaign, as was the arrival in unknown countries and physical environments, which meant new diseases and the ignorance by the physicians and healers of the treatments and herbs that could be appropriate for them. This means that Alexander's exhibitions were a real challenge for the eminent Greek medical science. During the campaign, Alexander's physicians were forced to deal with a lot of situations they probably were acquainted with, but they also had to face peculiar circumstances that led to a hard test for their knowledge. In any case, the campaign of Alexander in Asia affected deeply the concepts of Greek healing science, a fact that is also named by Hippocrates, who advises the physicians to follow armies in their campaigns, especially in far countries and lands, so as to acquire precious experiences in medical facts. Apart from the importance given from Alexander to the existence of experienced and cultivated healers and physicians in his campaign, he himself was also a great lover of medicine, an exquisite physician with real medical knowledge. According to Plutarch, in my opinion, Alexander's love of the art of healing was inculcated in him by Aristotle preeminently. Aristotle was the teacher of Alexander the Great. For he was not only fond of the theory of medicine, but actually came to the aid of his friends when they were sick and prescribed for them certain treatments and regimens. As a consequence, Alexander is presented to practice medicine and in some cases even to suggest therapeutic or hygiene actions for people. Plutarch, for example, says that during an accident in a hunting occasion, Craterus, who was friend and general of Alexander, was injured in his thigh, and his physician Pausanias wanted to provide him with hellebore, when he received a letter from Alexander himself recommending to the physician how to do so. On other occasion, Arrian says that Alexander himself showed his criticism with the physicians who had to treat him. This was actually happened during the episode of Alexander's sickness after his bath in the icy water of Kidnus River in Cilicia. What Arrian suggests in describing that incident is that Alexander accepted to drink the medicine Philip from Acarnania, his physician, offered to him, not just because he trusted the physician, but also because he agreed, according to his severe medical knowledge, that the medicine was appropriate to cure him. At the next step, Alexander seems to acquire some new medical abilities as the campaign reaches unknown lands and distant countries, like Bactria or India. This process is parallel to the upgrade of Alexander himself, who gradually obtains divine qualities due to the magnification of his medical deeds and achievements. In the above-mentioned episode with the injury of Craterus and beyond the recommendation to the physician, it seems that Alexander took part in the recovery of Craterus by other means. While Craterus was sick, Alexander had a vision in his sleep, whereupon he offered certain sacrifices himself for the recovery of his friends. This passage drives us to the religious aspect of the Greek medicine, since we can observe typical issue of the ancient Greek healing process, the sacrifice and a sort of incubation, where Alexander becomes the mediator between the human and the divine element. We can also see how this trend is proclaimed during an emergency case that happened in India. The poison of snakes in India was a real danger for Macedonians. As a matter of fact, a lot of soldiers died from that poison, while the physicians of Alexander could not find an appropriate remedy. The same poison was also used by Indians in their weapons, spears and arrows, a condition that made the seriousness even more severe. To face the problem, according to Arrian, Alexander used physicians from India. Nonetheless, Theodorus and Curtius underlined that it was Alexander himself who took the responsibility to find the solution to the problem, that is, to discover the remedy of the poison. According to Curtius, when Ptolemy, his friend, was wounded by a poisoned arrow, Alexander assisted him by staying beside his head when he became sleepy. And the Curtius says, for when Alexander had taken his place beside Ptolemy, he ordered a bed for himself to sleep on to be brought in. As soon as he lay down upon it, he immediately fell into a profound sleep. When he awoke, he said that in a dream, a serpent had appeared to him, carrying a herb in its mouth, which it had indicated to be a cure for the poison. And the king declared too that he would recognize the color of the herb if anyone could find it. Then, when it was found, for it was sought by many at the same time, he placed it upon the wound, and immediately the pain ceased, and within a short time the wound was scrubbed over. This is a pure evidence that an incubation, since a mythical animal, a dragon or snake, appeared to Alexander to provide him with a remedy. It seems that Alexander gathered in his own person the features of the Iatromantis and the Iatros, and we are probably also witnessing a process of transformation from a military leader with a high level of medical knowledge to a visionary in a close connection with the gods, receiving advice and dreams with miraculous medicine. All the above therapeutic qualities accompany Alexander's legend and history as they survive in the Christian and Byzantine world. Nonetheless, the Christian religion could not accept any other healer rather than Jesus Christ himself and the martyrs and saints under his name. Still, the early Byzantine era is a phase where the Christian doctrines were under the stage of shaping, a fact that allowed beliefs from the past, even the pagan past, to survive with the Christians. A pure example of that, also related to medicine and healing, is the figure of Nubis, a lion-headed snake with nimbus and rays, 7 for the known planets, or 12 for the signs of the zodiac. This symbol represents health and enlightenment, as well as the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. The image of Nubis is commonly found in engraved gems and talismans made from semi-precious stone dating back from the 1st century onwards. The therapeutic use of the image of Nubis is in early Byzantine gems could be related symbolically in something like a symbolic reference to the image of Alexander the Great. Since Alexander also had the appearance of a lion, he was born after Zeus Ammon slept with his mother Olympias in the form of a serpent, while according to the Romans of Pseudo-Callisthenes, Alexander traveled to the stars, traveled to the planets with a chariot carried by 2 griffins. Nubis was also one of the names of Zeus Ammon when presented with a head with horns or as a serpent. And Zeus Ammon, according to Plutarch, may be the father, even the father of Alexander the Great. In any case, the relationship, and to conclude with that, the relationship of Alexander the Great with practical and symbolic aspects of the process of healing and the art of medicine is evident among the people in the early Byzantine and Christian era, an element that impulses the use of his figure in gems for therapeutic purposes, not only to cure a disease, but to prevent a disease from appearing. After all, Alexander remained a mediator between the real world and the world of the divinity, and thus the presence of his figure could bring luck and subsequently good health to people bearing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trevisadakis, for bringing to our attention this very interesting gem about Alexander the Great and proposing parallels. We'll discuss them just a little bit later. So now I would like to invite all our guests to ask their questions. First, we start with Dr. Bosco. So we go back to Claudius and Agrippina Minor with the coins, the cistophori of Ephesus and the parallels on gems. Do you have questions, suggestions? Yes, please, Professor Wagner.
I'm afraid I have a question for Karina.
Yes, okay.
Mind that it's Ștefana, that was such a wonderful piece of detective work, so coherent. You said that Warren managed to buy his gem of the Armenian ruler in Izmir. Do you have any idea where Huntsman managed to get his gem from, or is it just generally the art market? And
no, I think he was a journalist, and he had a very famous news bureau, so a forerunner of DPA in the, don't know, the 60s, I think, 70s. And he traveled a lot, and he traveled also a lot in the East.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe this comes from the East.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, thank you.
But I think this is a very, very important piece to show how straight the connection could be between the patron and the Gemarius.
Mm-hmm.
Because this was not done by any Gemarius in the town. That was, I want to have that, I think.
Very convincing, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Then let's go to the paper of Dr. Weiss. I was also very interested in your paper, and I find your argumentation extremely solid. I am disappointed that you cannot relate really to an Armenian ruler who would be anti-Roman, because if you have an eupator, normally you should, it's quite certain that it should be rather on the Parthian side than on the Roman side. So with Tigran VI, we have a big problem. You know, the work of our colleagues who unfortunately died 2 years ago, very young, Federico Maria Muccioli, who worked and who studied all these epitheta of the Hellenistic kings, and he has a very good article on eupator. And he showed, I think, quite convincingly from the evidence which was available at that point, that eupator could have been used like, you know, a term in order to make the Roman furious, you know, to remind the big eupator.
Yeah, I haven't read that. Could you send that to me? That would be lovely. Thank you very much.
Any other questions, suggestions for Professor Weiss, for Dr. Weiss? Then for Fabio Bosco, if we go back, we are more or less in the same time, so the beginning of the 1st century AD. Gems and coins. And if nobody is decided to intervene, I would like to ask a question. What do you think about, you know, this hypothesis and criticism which were launched by specialists of Hellenistic and Roman sculpture like Luca Giuliani and François Querelle about comparing coins with gems, and they spoke about something like an emphasis in some portraits on gems. You know, like for example, Luca Giuliani, I think, used the term pathognomia. Could you observe something like that? So would you say that the portraits on gems are more emphasized than the portraits on coins? What is your position from your material?
First of all, I have not had the opportunity to read all the papers of articles caused the pandemic. So, but I think in the first period we can see the issues of Claudius and Agrippina. We find that iconography really closer to the Roman style. We can see the larvet rat, Agrippina was represented with bare head, and I think it's like I don't know. It's okay. Now I can.
Lo può dire in italiano.
Un sincretismo. A syncretism between the Roman iconographic tradition near the Hellenistic way to represent the temporal couple, like to the divinità. It's there is, and I focus my attention to Augustus and Antonius because I think Claudius is really connected with his ancestors. So, I noticed Tiberius and Livia, yes, but Augustus and Antony were really closer to Claudius because of their ancestors, and because I think he followed the same line of this, like Augustus for his reign. And but I want to be honest, I need to study a lot for have a clear portrait of this, per avere un quadro completo di questa situazione.
Altri commenti, suggerimenti? If not, I suggest to go to the paper of Ștefana Cristea, so discussing the iconography of Faustulus and Silvanus. Are there questions, observations? Anyone? I would start with a question, then hoping that other people much more specialists than me can intervene. What make you think that the representation of, I think we are all convinced by the parallels you found with the German, the piece in the German collection. What makes you think that it is this is a Faustulus and not only Silvanus? How do you justify the connection between the two when you don't have the wolf with the twins?
It's not just the wolf and the twins that define Faustulus, and I try to underline this after a certain time that Faustulus iconography lose this element, but is, in my opinion, not less Faustulus than the other one accompanied by the she-wolf and the twins. It's just a switch that is performed at the moment, and as I concluded, I think it is connected to the big transformation that took place at the end of the 2nd century, or in the second part of the 2nd century, and in the 3rd century, at the level of the religion, at the whole religion. Everything was changing, and for me, is the attitude of the personage, is the attitude of the man. It's a little bit leaning on the shepherd stick, is facing the tree. Usual, as you could see in my presentation, Silvanus is most of the time represented from the face, not from a side. And yes, he can be accompanied by a dog, and we can find the tree or a grapevine. But some other elements are most of the time present in the representations of Silvanus, such as a small altar or some other elements that are not familiar to the representations of Faustulus.
And how could we justify that it is not just a shepherd then in the end?
We cannot. Actually, we cannot. It is possible to be just a shepherd, but as you could see, the evolution is pointing us in this direction. Is pointing out in us in the direction of Faustulus, because some elements remains, some elements disappear, and others just transformed.
Thank you very much. Other questions, suggestions? Please jump in. You are warmly welcome.
Yeah. Could I speak?
Yes, please.
Yes. I wanted to say it was me who published that catalogue with the Faustulus gem, and my word is...
I didn't know.
I had there, my opinion was that also on earlier images, there is the dead hair with Faustulus, and that's why I thought I could make the connection. And you said you probably would date the gem a little bit later than I did. I was drawn by these things by the proportions. It's a very broad gem and it's rather thick. And this is clearly a late Republican sign. And therefore, I also had the same question like you, couldn't it be earlier? Couldn't it be 2nd century? And then I said, no, the proportions are the early ones. That's just to let you know.
Thank you very much. I noticed that are 2 other gems with Faustulus in the book, but I could relate it more with this one because it was more similar with the one that I was studying, and because the picture, it was better.
Yeah, that's always a problem.
Yes, I know. But thank you very much. It helps me a lot, and also some other gems from this catalog will help me to write my book.
Yeah, this is a very good hint for late Republican gems, broad and thick.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Other questions, suggestions? Let's go to the last paper and we can come back, of course, to all the others. So Nikos Trivisadakis, the Alexander paper. I have some questions, suggestions. First, of course, unfortunately, the Abu Qir medallions and the Fukok synagogue are not about Alexander, so Abu Qir is more or less considered to be a fake, and the synagogue mosaic is now also more or less considered to represent the Seleucid king rather than Alexander. But I would like to thank you and congratulate you for bringing the gem to our knowledge. As you said also at the end of the paper, I think the best relationship is with the Romans of Alexander. From the 3rd century AD, put together from the 1st century AD, but of course with a long tradition in Hellenistic and early Roman times. And I think these gems, besides the Roman coins from the 3rd, of course in Macedonia, Beroia coins, and then the medallions of gold of the 3rd, and then 5th century in Rome, the cotorniates, together with these gems showed the importance and justified what John Chrysostom said against the people who used the images of Alexander as a talisman. I wanted just to say that we have the same thing in Central Asia, not the same thing, but you know, this use of Alexander the Great image in late antiquity. In the 4th, 5th, 6th century, we have terracotta heads of Alexander the Great, which were put all over the place, you know, to decorate all kinds of objects. So in order to protect them. I think it's a phenomenon which can be compared in the East and West. And this terracotta were published by the Russian team and will be republished by the French team working in Samarkand. Are there other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, please, Alessandra Magni.
No, not you.
No.
No, I would. If I may, I would
please
say something. Alexander has these wide open eyes. And if you deal with the bad luck and the bad view, böser Blick in German, then I wonder, couldn't this be a quality, his wide eyes in all the depictions, that makes him apt or good for healing or for avoiding away evil?
May I say something? Yes, that feature is, of course, I agree with what you said, but what I would like to point out is that the therapeutic qualities, the medical, let's say, qualities of Alexander was a much greater, had a much greater background. His form at these early years was charged in a way with that content, something that in the later years became more political, more military, became a more military figure, more political figure. He was connected with the emperor. The emperor was a descendant of Alexander the Great, of Constantine the Great, of Alexander the Great. It was something different. And that is exactly where I would like to point out that in the early years, another trait, another characteristic of Alexander was that he was also, his figure was also charged with that medical and physical content, okay, to be said simple.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We are already out of time, so I would like to ask those of you who want to take a break to go and take the break and to come back at 6 o'clock Istanbul time, and the others to continue the discussion if you want with Dr. Trivisadakis.
Okay. So Martin, would you ask?
Yeah. I had a question about the Alexander with the ram's horn. And in Byzantine art, you start from a cameo with Alexander with ram's horn. In Byzantine art, is a theme really diffused in this image, the image of Alexander with ram's horn?
Well, with the passing of the centuries and the content of Alexander figure, as I said, changes. This means that Alexander becomes one of the points of reference for the emperor, for the dynasties, and that is of crucial importance in what you asked, because the iconography of Alexander in a great extent changes, and the Alexander becomes a Christian and a Byzantine emperor. In the manuscripts of the Romans of Alexander the Great, as the Code 5 of the Institute of Venice, or the code, the relevant code in Bodleian Library, the Alexander is actually a Byzantine emperor. So all these threads that are related to an iconography that has to do with, let's say, pagan roots, okay, they are excluded from his iconography. He becomes a Byzantine figure, a Byzantine emperor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
Martin.
Yes, the Alexander appears with a helmet on, I think, in one of the bowls smaller bowls from the Mildenhall treasure, which is 4th century, together with a companion piece, probably of his mother Olympias. And these would have been the sort of things that would have been on the table, but there would have been an element of that these things brought good luck to the diners. So I think this belongs to the, as it were, pre-imperial idea, and the idea that Alexander is a very lucky figure to put on a bowl which is displayed or used at the dinner table.
You're absolutely right. And in the East, in the Al-Sabah collection now of vases, which were recovered in probably in Afghanistan, we have this kind of vases with images of Alexander, so with medallions, which were compared by Prudence Harper with the Mildenhall treasure. Yes, Dr. Trivisadakis, maybe you would like to answer.
Yes. Well, it is evident that Alexander was considered a lucky man, but a lucky man that died in the age of 33. So that measures a little bit his good luck on the one hand. On the other hand, when we come to the age of Christianity, Well, the idea and the legend of Alexander comes in contrast with the new ideas that are introduced by the new religion. In a very cruel and very strict Christian context, Alexander could not be a saint, could not be a healer, could not be good luck, because he was a pagan king. And I would like to remind you the vision, the story from the Ancient Testament, the vision of the prophet Daniel, who speaks for the 4 empires that are to be destroyed as a sign of the decadence of men. And one of the empires is the empire of Alexander the Great, as it was interpreted. So, yes, Alexander is a bearer of good luck, but in a Christian context and in the first formation of that Christian context, that is not evident. That's not something that we could expect without doubt. But what we can say at this point, how can we justify that symbolic content of the image of Alexander? Because at these first years, the good luck of Alexander was still had a very strong appeal, had very strong impact in the consciousness of the simple people who dealt with Alexander not as a pagan, not as a pure pagan king, but mainly as a figure who was a nexus, a mediator between the world of the humans and the world of the divinity. And if you are a simple human in the first Christian ages, you cannot discern if the divine element is the Zeus, or if it is the Zeus Ammon or Ammon Ra, or, for example, the Christian God. It is just the divine element. And what I want a mediator between me and the divine element. So in something, I believe that was the function of the figure of Alexander in these ages.
My suggestion would be to think about the Romans of Alexander and the very numerous traditions from the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th century AD in all the languages. So because we have a rich tradition not only in Greek, but also in Latin from Julius Valerius from the 4th century, in Syriac, and now we discovered also in Pelevi parchment from the 6th century. With traces from the Alexander Romans. We know that Alexander was in Talmud from the 5th century AD. And of course, he's in the Quran. So there is not really an opposition between Christianity and Alexander. And the good fortune of Alexander could be related to his access to his visit to the terrestrial paradise, which is attested from the 5th century AD for example, in the Jewish Talmud, but also throughout all the dozens of versions of the Alexander Romans. So trying to go back to Pseudo-Callisthene and to this success in late antiquity and Byzantine times, and understand, because Alexander was able to access the terrestrial paradise, and in fact he received, even in the Arabic tradition, so in the Syriac and the Arabic tradition, he received the eye, from the paradise. So this is the eye, the stone. Who made him understand that he was not so terrible, so great as he thought. Of course, it's a good lesson, and but also the tradition of the eye and the good eye. So I think that Calais too hates about his fact that he conquered the whole world, and he managed to go even behind all the limits of humanity. So yeah, it's a suggestion. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for that. But I had only 15 minutes. Okay.
It's not at all a criticism. It's not at all a criticism. It's to congratulate you for bringing to our attention this amazing material. And I would like to congratulate all the speakers of the panel, because you taught me a lot of things. So I learned a lot from all of you. Thank you very much. And thank you for the discussions. So now you have just 1 minute for the next panel. Thank you very, very much. So